Welcome to the Material Impact Podcast by 1020 Marketing. This is where industrial suppliers come to explore how marketing, modernization, and smart strategy can fuel growth. Each episode, we share insights, ideas, and conversations designed to help suppliers connect with manufacturers and move their business forward. AI is here, but most small and mid-sized industrial businesses don't know where to start. Jeremy Meyer has built a company to solve that exact challenge. Jeremy brings years of experience building and leading global software engineering teams. He now focuses on generative AI consulting and training, helping businesses and teams turn new technologies into practical solutions. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here.
How about I ask you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background?
Well, as you said, I am a computer scientist by training, by background. For a lot of my career, I was employed as a software engineer. That's how I started, doing a variety of different software development work, mostly Java, actually. But then I discovered that I was actually pretty good at writing about software and talking about software and programming languages and explaining stuff. So I gradually moved into training as a full-time job. And from there, my career developed as it does. I started managing training teams and finally running large global training organizations, which I ended up doing for SAP. And so, when AI came along, I was obviously attracted to that aspect of it, of helping people unwrap it. And it didn't take me long to realize that that was going to be a full-time thing. So
for those of us who don't know much about WinWave, could you give us a little bit of context, what the company is, why it started, and who you're working with?
So there are three of us, with three founders. There's myself, there's Tom Gay, and Rylan McKinley.
So Rylan is a friend of mine, and he's the one who introduced me to you.
Right.
Great guy, really great guy.
We all have different backgrounds. Rylan comes from a marketing background. Tom is professional services and I'm education, but all kind of with a technical focus. So we all had our own take on AI, but we were all pretty aligned right from the beginning on the fact that AI adoption is firstly essential for any small, medium business wanting to remain competitive at the moment. Mm-hmm. And also that it can't be done in a half-hearted fashion. It's really got to be done in a kind of holistic fashion with a full adoption strategy. So, Rylan and I found each other by networking. Tom and I had worked together previously. So the discussions about starting a new company came pretty naturally and pretty quickly. Rylan created a draft of the program, which has now become our specific way of helping companies to adopt AI and to get a clear sort of practical plan around how they want to do that. And we guide them through starting from basic literacy all the way up to, if necessary, and if that's the right fit, all the way up to finding customized solutions that they can implement themselves.
What made you want to get into this area of consulting? And, what was the moment where you said, oh, this is what the next phase of my career is going to be?
It's a good question. I mean, as a software engineer, I've always been exposed to this problem that we always have of needing the latest version, right? It's something you grow up with. Software developers always want the latest version of a framework. And if you're delivering training, it's worse because, if you've got a version of the training that covers version 3.1 of the product, but 3.2 has just been released and everybody wants 3.2. There might be almost no difference, but there's this kind of constant psychological feeling that, you're missing out on something. And so with AI, that's just explosive. It's tenfold. And so I guess I almost had this kind of FOMO, this fear of missing out. I thought, wow, I want to be involved with AI. I want to see where it's going. It's very exciting. It's bringing me back some of that excitement I had as a junior developer because of what it's capable of and the problems it's capable of solving. But I realized that no, this is going to be full time. You can't sit on the fringes of this if you want to remain current with AI as your focus. It's an absolutely full time thing. So, I guess around early 2023, when I started to look at it, it probably took me a few months before I realized that this is my new career.
So let's talk about let's talk a little bit about how this is relevant to SMBs. And our agency, we work almost exclusively with material suppliers to manufacturing companies, like in the industrial space. What would you say to them, and what do you think they need to do, or how do they overcome a struggle to adopt AI technologies?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that there is a struggle. Everybody's struggling at the moment, especially SMBs. And I think that, what we see across all industries, and you can find these on our website, obviously, is that just the sheer number of choices, the sheer number of use cases, of ways that you can apply generative AI, the sheer number of potential process improvements that you can do in your organization is just overwhelming, and it grows every day. It's on an exponential growth path. So that's kind of a risky, scary proposition. And it's something that if it's done without the right insight and the right strategy and the right approach can be, it could be potentially risky to the business. I mean, how do you budget? How do you guarantee return on investment? There's no clear roadmap, right? Nobody has yet written the kind of perfect playbook for AI adoption. So you remember how people used to say that no one ever got fired for recommending IBM? Well, that safety net doesn't exist anymore, right? Those training wheels are gone. As is the reliability of that old school kind of business process mentality of, this is what you have to do. And if you follow this, you'll be fine. It's kind of, it's hard, right? So now you have to think more about, analyzing your processes, looking at the data that you've got, your different data sources, looking at things like your employees' skill sets, even their comfort level. What is your management level buy-in in your organization? It's very holistic. It's kind of, change management is actually a large part of AI adoption. So you really have got to think of, all of these elements and piece them together into an overall sort of holistic strategy.
Sorry, Jeremy, I think what would really be helpful for those listening is, what are some practical examples for this type of business, small, medium-sized business, in the industrial space? What are some practical examples that you can give them for what they could be using these tools for to improve in terms of their processes and so forth?
Wow. Well, I mean, we could talk for an hour just on those. I think there are so many, but
you're not scaring me. I can talk for an hour, no problem.
Good. Well, off the top of the head, if you think about it from the perspective of different departments, say marketing, right? Your own particular area. Teams are able to create and repurpose marketing content in a fraction of the time. You know how long it takes to create good marketing copy. So imagine you want to write a description of a product and then be able to turn that into a little blog about that product, or you want to be able to turn it into a tagline or just a simple, paragraph for a website. All of those things are now super fast and super easy. And then if you start bringing in the idea of having some of your company's data, your sales team, for example, could use AI to automatically draft responses to a quote request. Somebody could come in and request a quote, and you've got product info, you've got pricing, you've got inventory info. You can pull all of that in. You could draft an email, and you could have something which is, just ready to hit send on. You could fully automate it, but of course that would be maybe slightly risky, but you could still save hours of admin time, being able to do things like that. So you're really just giving somebody something they need to approve and hit the final send on. And then, across all areas of your organization, finance teams, things like categorizing expenses, if you don't have a system where you categorize every single thing, or if you get expenses which are not properly categorized, that used to be very, very difficult. And now it's not that difficult. You could actually upload an image of a receipt to an AI tool. You could say, please look at all of the items and categorize each one into the different expenses, and it would do it. So, that's another thing. And then if you look internally, the running of the business, business intelligence with AI. I mean, you don't necessarily need to have a tailored dashboard anymore, which you might, which might be a very large and expensive piece of business intelligence software. You don't necessarily need to have a data analyst who can do a SQL query and pull information out. You can say, hey, go and have a look at this spreadsheet and tell me what my best products were in the last quarter. Tell me what my best region was, and it'll go and find that stuff. So really, there are so many, and of course, then there's just the general way that employees get a huge saving by just using tools like ChatGPT to draft internal emails or write articles, any of those things.
It's interesting to me because, from my perspective, right, I've been using some of these tools for years and years and years, right? Before ChatGPT came out a few winters ago and everybody was going gaga over it, we were using AI. It just wasn't labeled as AI. It was just what was happening behind the scenes, right?
Right.
We do, search advertising, right? Everything that Google has been doing in terms of understanding bidding and putting your search ad out there is all generated by algorithmic decision making AI, and it's been doing that for years. But since ChatGPT came out and these other subsequent avalanche of tools, everybody feels that they need to label everything as AI. But most business people have probably been using it in some sense or another for many, many years.
Well, I think if you look at the sort of meteoric rise of popularity, it took OpenAI 2 months to reach 100 million users.
Right.
Now, why did that happen? It happened because all of this amazing research, a lot of it with Google, and a lot of it with various other organizations as well, it was still kind of scientific research. I mean, I was studying neural nets when I was at university longer ago than I care to admit.
Right.
But it had kind of frozen. Neural networks were not really going anywhere. They made statements about what would happen with AI in the 70s, which didn't really materialize until the 90s. But then suddenly, the biggest thing I think which came along and blew everything away was that OpenAI released an interface. You could just go to a website and you could type something and you could have a large language model respond. And that is what absolutely took the world by storm, I think. So that ability for people to actually interact with it. And from the tooling side, and I mean, if you look at, look at worlds like the manufacturing world, there are and have been so many kind of pieces of AI technology in manufacturing equipment, in assembly lines and all these things for years and years, and those are very specific to the to the various industries and to the operations of those things, but one isn't aware of them. The great thing about the AI that we're talking about, which is really generative AI, is that it helps the human side of things, the human knowledge work, as we say, structures content. It helps you make decisions. It helps you sort of calculate things logically and so on. And that, I think, is the extraordinary, that's the extraordinary change that we're seeing.
How would you coach a business, somebody who's been tasked inside a business to examine, how AI technologies can help them streamline or, become more efficient or however you want to call it. How would you coach them? Because it's my experience using these tools that what you get out could be great, but it's only as accurate. I don't want to say it that way, but it's only as good as the prompt you put in, right? So is part of your program teaching people how to ask what they're looking for properly?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very important part of it. what used to be called prompt engineering, which I think is, it's a term which is falling out of favor slightly. We talk more about context engineering. And as the new models come out, they are more and more powerful. And can do more and more, and you need less and less prompt. But it's it's very important to understand how to create the right context to get what you want. And what you say is absolutely true. It is only as good as the prompt that comes out, but it's also only as good as the training data that goes in.
Right.
And these large foundational models like ChatGPT and like Claude and the really big ones, Grok, from XAI, Gemini from Google, and of course, DeepSeek, et cetera. These have got mind-bogglingly huge amounts of training data, but it is still limited. And what we see, which is a really one of the very important and useful uses of AI, especially for small, medium businesses, is the idea of what we call RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, which is basically the idea that you can have a document which describes your particular product or your business or whatever area of information you want to focus on. And then you have the AI, which is answering questions based on that data.
Right.
And so that's a very important thing to remember. You can focus these amazing tools on working with a very specific and useful.
So let's go back a little bit. I know we got a little bit sidelined, but specific use cases you see for suppliers to manufacturers. I know we talked about ideas, but are there any specific ideas or practical examples that you have in terms of whether, sales and operations or customer engagement outcomes could be affected?
I think that there are some, again, the amount of tools and things that are out there are incredible. And I think that if you look at sort of use cases, say, across supply chain management, there are tools like Blue Yonder, which I'm not really an expert, but I know of it, which, for example, will do everything from kind of planning transportation and warehouse management all the way to delivery and supply management generally. And so I think those are areas where it's very tempting to say, wow, let's just get in the right tool and this will fix things, because it's obviously a very specific and useful use case. I would underline that with a cautionary tale, which is that even in cases like that, where it seems to be a very obvious and clear example where AI can come in and fix things, you do need to make sure that you're fixing problems that you actually have and that you're not creating new ones.
That's very fair. You emphasize in our discussion about being literate in this space, and could you be specific about what does that mean and why does it matter more than the tools themselves?
Yes. So I think we talk about this kind of explosive world, and it's a word I probably overuse, but it's true, right? And I think that there is so much hype that comes with that, because everybody just is talking about generative AI, and if you're on LinkedIn, everybody's posting about it. It's consuming everybody at the moment. And so what that does is it creates this vocabulary which people use and people latch onto, like, for example, agents and agentic AI, or even AI itself. A lot of people won't distinguish between generative AI and AI, as we just did. We discussed how it could be, part of machines. You've been exposed to AI before, but not in its kind of generative large language model guise, if you like. So it's very important, if you're going to really adopt AI in a way which is going to benefit your organization, it's important that you really understand what those things mean and actually how they can really help and bring you ROI, not just follow the hype, not just follow the vocabulary that you're hearing other people saying.
So let's use a practical example, okay? So I come to you and I say, Jeremy, I have a client who's in the industrial supply space, okay? They're making widgets that go to a manufacturing company and they build that widget into their product. How could my client, a supplier, how could they build AI understanding? like I'm the manager and I'm deciding I want to implement these technologies. How do I talk to my team about this? There are going to be people on my team who are technical, and there are people on my team who are going to be not technical at all. Like, how do I build momentum for it internally to adopt this kind of, solution or approach?
I would say that in a case like that, our approach seems to be the best, which is that we start with the idea of basic literacy. So we start with basic training, and that is always focused on particular roles. So you might have technical people within an organization, you might have non-technical people, you've got operational people, you might have managers. They all need to have their own take on exactly which parts of AI they need to be considering and so on, because again, it needs to be a holistic thing. After that, once we have enough in-house knowledge within an organization for them to be able to make sensible decisions, then we can work with them to work out useful use cases, improvements of workflows and business processes so that they can actually benefit and get real advances, not just be forcing people to use AI to do something which either they don't agree with or doesn't really help. For example, we very often talk about human in a loop or human in the loop processes. And what that means is that we are using generative AI, but at some point there's a person involved. The example I used earlier was, maybe generating a sales email based on pulling some product information and on a quote request. So that has human in the loop because somebody's got to be ready to click the button. You're going to read it first. You're not just going to blindly send it. And so those things are still very, very useful. They're real time savers. And that's a kind of maybe an early maturity stage of an organization. So we want to get everybody to a point where they're talking accurately about AI, where they're understanding what its real benefits are. And then you find you can start having the conversation with the right people in an organization, which is, could there be any customized solutions? Could we be using agentic AI? Could we develop this further into something which is really specific to our business, which will really help us? And then if you're building your particular widget and you've got some very specific information about that widget, and you could build either some tool which would help you to source the parts of it, or which would help to guide you through the process of quality control of that part. There are so many different ways that you could do that. But if you were to build something customized for that very specific thing, the rewards would be enormous, but you can't get there immediately.
So give me a success story, Jeremy, something that WinWave has worked on that helped a client do great things.
Well, I'm kind of rather fond of our own success story, which obviously, to start with, which is that, we're in this world of AI where things are changing, as I said, so fast. And, I've worked in training organizations in my career where the training material for software for large organizations has not been updated in as long as 10 years, to give you an idea. Now, in a more modern world, as I said, every time you have the new version of the software coming out, that needs to be updated. But in the AI world, you need to update training content every week. I mean, it's just, everything gets out of date. So, what we've done is we have created processes where we use generative AI in conjunction with us. So obviously I will decide on what I want the scope of a particular training to do. I use generative AI to research that training, to break it down into the structure of what a training course might be, break it down into bullet points, and to help me to expand those out. And then what we do is we can use that to analyze against the needs of the customer, which of those training components would need to be included in the program. And then what we also do is actually, while we're presenting that, we are using generative AI to create part of the training. So the training is actually dynamically created. So rather than, for example, showing a pie chart of usage of AI tools, I will say, here's a prompt, and go and create the pie chart and look at the pie chart, and then we can discuss it. So that's, I think, one of the great success stories. And then I think one of the others is, we've seen it so many times now, but I think it really is one of these almost no-brainer return on investment ideas, which is to have some form of chatbot. So there are so many organizations who have done this now. So it can it's on your website, it can either help with customer support, or it can help with product information. And it could be, as I said, a custom chat GPT, which is where you have your own product information, which is deployed actually by OpenAI, but is still customized to your own particular use, or it could be incorporated into your own website. So those are always a real success.
Yeah, that's a great example, and a great one for our clients who are looking for marketing tips as well, for increased sales and leads and just customer support, right? So, and what about the other side of the coin? Challenges, missteps, things that you saw an attempt at AI adoption not work out.
Well, I think the missteps or the failures, and let's call them temporary failures because they can always be righted. But they come from, as I said, a kind of a lack of understanding that you need a holistic approach, and that you need some kind of analysis. So it's very tempting to say, let's just buy this tool because it's the right thing to do. And it's an AI tool, and AI is good. So AI will help our business. But that's not always going to work, as I said. I mean, there are certain tools which you should probably just think about using. There isn't any reason why you shouldn't be using ChatGPT, apart from, whatever security and privacy policies you might have in a large organization. But apart from that, there should be no reason. There are other tools, like Otter, and Fireflies, which will record a meeting and take meeting notes and identify to-do lists and summarize. Those are no-brainers. Those are things that you need to bring into your organization. But if you're investing in a large tool, like I mentioned, Blue Yonder and so on, that's quite an investment, and you do need to make sure that your strategy is there. So one of the other examples I've seen, I had a client who was a manufacturing company based in Ontario, around 120 employees. And they actually, their executive management was fairly young and fairly kind of modern in their approach, if you like, and they wanted to investigate AI. And they had a guy from their IT department, let's call him Barry, and they asked Barry to look into AI. And Barry did a pretty good job of analyzing a few ways that they could include it in their organization and use it. But there was no strategy and there was no plan. And what had happened is that he'd presented these ideas to them and they thought, yeah, that's great. But there was no real there was no real idea of next steps or what they should do. And so eventually he became disgruntled and left. And that's when they asked me to come in and have a look and see what he'd done and what he proposed and where they could go from there. And, again, he hadn't done a bad job at all. It wasn't as holistic as it could be. There was nothing wrong with any of the things that he suggested. But I think it was a failure on their part to understand that it's not something you can do, by part or bit by bit. It's something that needs to be a part of your business strategy.
Poor Barry.
Poor Barry. Well, I think Barry probably found another job where he could be part of a larger AI team. So,
that's good. That's good. Well, then good for Barry.
Good for Barry.
Everything worked out in the end. Jeremy, we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I just wanted to conclude and get some final advice for our audience suppliers. If somebody listening runs a B2B company and isn't sure, whether this approach is worth their time, what's your one piece of advice for them?
Get on board as fast as you can. That's what I would say. I could be really harsh and say, if you think AI isn't worth your time, then maybe running a business isn't your thing. But that, a more polite way of saying that might be just to remind you, AI isn't hype. It's not a bubble. There's a lot of discussion about the fact that it might be a financial bubble, but don't look at, the vast investments into AI companies and into all these evaluations. Look at the technology. Right now, it's already disrupting the world as we know it. And if you want to keep a competitive edge in business, you've got to have AI as part of your strategy. So, this is not science fiction. It's not hearsay. This is real. It's happening now. So one piece of advice, get on board as fast as you can.
That's great. Jeremy, I'm going to take you a little bit off track before we wrap. Okay. I have a son who is currently studying computer science. Is that a smart path for him to go down? And what advice would you give to a kid who is going to be entering the workforce in a year or two, who wants to make the most of his skill set if he's coming from that kind of background?
That's a great question. And it's a question I've come up. I have a few friends whose kids are doing computer science. And one of them says that he regrets this and regrets having guided his kid, because he's obviously a computer scientist himself. I don't believe that. I think that right now, as I said, there's a lot of hype. One of the areas of hype around AI is how much code it can generate, how much program it can do. And I think that we're now starting to come full circle where people are realizing, oh, wow, I was able to vibe code all of these things and create applications without any background knowledge. But in fact, now they're realizing, well, that's still not engineering. You're just creating something which looks pretty, which is very, very useful. You can build yourself a few basic tools. You can show your product department an idea that you've had. It's an incredible thing. But when it comes down to engineering software and doing all of those things, I think computer scientists are going to be very necessary. And I don't think that world will go away. I think the way that their job looks and what they're doing every day will be very different from what I was doing when I first started out as a computer scientist. But I still think it's a very good field. And I think, if anything, it's going to become more important.
Phew. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that perspective. Jeremy, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can find me on LinkedIn, for example, or and you could do a company search for WinWave. That's WinWaiv with an AI in it. And you could go to our website, which is winwave.ai or winwave.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Amazing.
Well, Jeremy, I want to take a minute to say thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be a guest on the show. I found this to be very enlightening and an important conversation to have, because I think a lot of companies just don't know where to start. And I appreciate your input and advice.
Well, it was great fun being here. And I hope we can have another conversation in a little while, and then we can talk about how everything that we discuss now is out of date and
changed. I would love it. I'll keep you on the Rolodex.
Great.
That aged me, I think, saying Rolodex, but we'll run with it for now. All right, Jeremy, have a great rest of your day. I appreciate your time.
You too. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.